I am live. I am reading out of Lord of the Horizon. It is a far memory book by Joan Marshall Grant. She was a seer and she wrote books about her previous incarnations. This is her life as Ra-Ab, a male, in ancient Egypt. I'm here in the fourth part of this book, and it is chapter 10, entitled The Road to Affection. It was Nekhet, priest of Osiris, who said to me later that evening, "Until now, I did not realize how many willing assistants Set is able to command. For 20 years Amenemhet has been in the underworld, yet he built his own caverns. Do you remember Roydon's once saying, 'Make a man feel guilty and he is ready to acknowledge Set as his overlord'? If you look at the bricks of nearly every building in hell, you would find on them not the cartouche of Set or Sekhmet, but guilt enclosed with the name of some unfortunate. Why should Amenemhet, of all men, have felt guilty? Why should the murder of a Babylonian woman, whom I would have most willingly killed for him, have so affected Pharaoh? He must have fallen into the habit of guilt long before that happened. His father was a vizier, and although he worked under the old rule, I gather that he was a most careful and diligent man. In youth, Amenemhet was interested only in things such as lion hunting. No doubt his father often accused him of idleness. The first seed of guilt was, "I am idle. My father is burdened by a responsibility which I have neither the wit nor the inclination to share." Then he met Roydon and became one of the watchers of the horizon, yet he thought he should have done so only because it was his duty to Egypt, not as a new adventure. The second seed of guilt, for he did not realize that it is right for a duty to be a new adventure. Then he became vizier and had to play a double role, as one of the eyes of Horus and as the trusted counselor of a decadent Pharaoh. It is not pleasant to be in the confidence of someone whom you are plotting to betray. Unless you recognize that when two loyalties conflict, you must follow the higher without remorse. You have to armor yourself with hatred and eventually come to look upon all affection as the temptation to be weak. He decided that if he permitted himself to feel affection towards those whom one day he might have to judge, he would not be able to assess them without bias. There were many people whom under different circumstances he would have made his friends. He used hatred to conceal from himself that they might in the future think of him as a betrayer. Unfortunately, he had not learned that hatred and understanding are incompatible, that only with understanding can justice be given, the enemy be rendered harmless and made ready for affection to turn him into a friend. Thus the third seed of guilt was sown. He would have preferred to be a vizier to Amenemhet, whom he liked as a man and respected as a leader, than to become a pharaoh who might be remembered as the usurper. He knew that this desire was an unspoken criticism of the wisdom of Roydon. Because of it, he felt that he betrayed both Roydon and Amenemhet. The fourth and fifth seeds of guilt. He married for expediency, thus betraying one of the ideals of the Watchers, the sixth seed. He married the daughter of the man who might have been his pharaoh and failed to make her happy, the seventh seed. Then for a time you showed him that only by love can the bitter harvest of guilt be destroyed. He opened the doors which barred the road of affection to affection, and with Nefertari he found happiness and peace. She died, and because he had suffered through affection, he took it for yet another sign of guilt. He saw even in the love he felt for her, the sign of the destroyer, and so again closed himself against it, the 8th seed. In his heart, he was glad when his daughter died, for every time he saw her, he remembered that had she not been born, her mother might be alive. She died of the summer fever, but because he desired her death, he felt like a murderer, the ninth guilt. To justify his sense of guilt, he refused to recognize the real character of the Babylonian. Through her, he made Senusert suffer, the 10th seed. But why try to measure by numbers the burden he carried? He felt guilty every time he drew breath, for in his heart he knew that he betrayed himself because he refused to obey the great law of Ra. He believed he was going mad, not only because he saw the Babylonian, but because he wanted to be mad. For then he could have said, "My sins must be forgiven me. The mad are not responsible for what they do." I have been able to lift from Amenemhet the burden of his old guilt, but unless he can learn to live by the light of affection, he will never know the peace which endures. Senusert came to my room early next morning, and before he spoke I realized that something deeply disturbed him. Patakifa says that father is very ill. She has sent for Teten, and they think it may be the summer fever, even though the worst of the hot weather is over. For the next 12 days none of us knew whether the next hour would begin the 40 days' lamentation throughout the two lands. Crowds waited in the outer courtyard of the palace. Had Amenemhet seen how much they longed for news of his recovery, he would have known that he need never have feared his people. Patakifa, or one of the healer priests, were able to reduce his fever, but in an hour it had mounted again until his skin burned as though he were lost in a waterless desert. Yet there was no sign of the delirium which usually accompanies such an illness. He was seldom conscious for more than a few moments, but then he seemed perfectly composed, was obedient as a child, and expressed gratitude to those who ministered to him. Gradually these periods of consciousness became more frequent, until at last he seemed entirely rational. I was in the room when Teten told him that he would soon be completely restored to health. This appeared to distress him, and he said, "You need not try to hide from me that I am a sick man, for I assure you I am perfectly able to bear any pains which my body may inflict upon me. My crook and flail are safe in the hands of my son. Why then should I resent my failing strength? My body is no different to any other man's, and when it has served its purpose, no one should weep, because he knows that soon it will return to dust." Senusert found his attitude disquieting. It is so unlike him, Ra-Ab. He has always bitterly resented being ill. Even when he had fever, he insisted on taking audience, though had he been well, he would have preferred me to do it for him. If at any time I said he looked tired, it was to incur his instant displeasure. We were in the garden, and Necked was sitting beside me peeling an apricot. He looked up. Of course Amenemhet dreaded to be ill when he thought his body was his only protection against the Babylonian. Don't either of you realize why he wants to go on being ill now? He rejoices that he has put off an old burden, but is afraid of a new cavern. How can he build anything so long as he remains helpless as a child, unable to take any responsibility? He knows that unless he learns to live by the light of affection, he will again find himself alone in the dark. It is not easy to change your habits after 20 years, especially when you are Pharaoh. He has made it difficult for himself to find friendship, for he deliberately became remote and austere. Yet while he is ill, he can accept tributes of affection and allow himself to display gratitude without hurt to his pride, for he only sees those who know his secret, from whom he has nothing to hide. But when he is well again, he must live among people whom he had has always regarded as strangers. I believe he's right, Ra-Ab, said Senusert. We must arrange for father to leave the palace until he has regained his self-confidence. It need not be generally known that he has left here, so he can forget for a time that he is Pharaoh. Where shall we send him? To the summer palace? Then, before Senusert had time to answer, I added, no, it must be to a place which holds no memories for him. Could we take him to the Oryx? Later. Nothing could be better for him, but he is not yet strong enough to make so long a journey. Then Nekhet said, why not send him to the house of the two winds? Becket is the person he needs. To her he will always be Senusert's father, not the lord of the two lands. If she can make a hawk share its food with a mouse deer, she should have no difficulty in making Amenemhet remember that he too belongs to the kinship which is shared by all the children of Ra. So that was the end of chapter 11. Chapter 10, sorry. Chapter 11 is Land of Free People.